Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit and really explore what it means to truly trust and follow God's lead.
Okay.
And to help us kind of unpack this, we're going to be looking at some excerpts from pasted text.
Okay.
But we're really going to zero in on Genesis chapter 24, verses 10 through 49, with a special focus on verse 12.
Sounds good.
So to set the stage a little bit,
Yeah.
we're essentially diving into the story of Abraham and his servant, and this super important mission
Right.
to find a wife for Isaac.
Yes.
Uh,
It's a story packed with insights.
Yeah,
We're witnessing Abraham's servant basically embark on this huge mission to find a wife for Isaac.
right.
And he is the heir to God's covenant promises.
It's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
It wasn't just about, swiping right or,
Yeah.
finding someone compatible,
Yeah.
on some app.
Right.
This was about the future of Abraham's entire lineage.
Absolutely. And what's really striking is the servant's approach to this. He really recognizes the weight of this decision.
Yeah.
And instead of relying on his own judgment or, limited wisdom,
Right.
he turns to God for
Yeah.
guidance. And his prayer in verse 12 is just a beautiful example of humility and dependence.
Yeah, and he's not just throwing out a vague request either.
Right.
It's not like,
Yeah.
God, find me a good wife for my, my master's son.
Yeah.
He's very specific.
Yes.
He asks for a very specific sign.
Absolutely.
He wants a woman at the well
Right.
who's going to offer him water,
Yes.
but then go above and beyond
Yeah.
by offering to water his camels.
10 camel.
10 camels.
Yeah.
That's a lot of water.
That's a lot of water.
It's not just a quick, sip from the well.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I think that detail is so crucial
Yes.
because it reveals that the servant wasn't just looking for any woman.
Right.
He was looking for someone with specific qualities.
Right.
Someone who exemplified generosity and a willingness to serve.
Yeah. And it really makes you think, when we're faced with big decisions in our own lives,
Yeah.
do we approach prayer with that same level of detail and intentionality?
Right. Are we that specific with
Or
God?
we're just kind of oh, God bless this,
Yeah. Generic prayers.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to get caught up in our own desires or what we think is best,
Absolutely.
without really seeking that clear direction from God.
And the servant's prayer reminds us that we need to surrender
Yes.
our limited perspective and really ask God for a clear direction.
Yeah.
And you know what? The story doesn't disappoint.
Yeah. It
You
doesn't. It really doesn't.
It's almost like a scene from a movie.
It is.
The servant, he arrives at the well, and who appears but Rebecca.
Yeah, a beautiful young woman.
A beautiful young woman.
And she doesn't just fulfill the first part of the prayer
Right.
by offering him water.
She goes above and beyond.
She blows it out of the water
Yeah.
by offering to water all 10 of his camels.
All 10 camels.
It's crazy.
It's pretty amazing.
But what I find really interesting is that the servant doesn't immediately jump for joy.
Right.
He doesn't start celebrating.
Cautious.
He remains silent
Yes.
and observes, almost like he's waiting for that final confirmation.
He's looking for that confirmation from God that
Yeah.
this is indeed the one.
Okay, God, I see what you're doing here.
Yes.
You know.
It's like a little nod from God.
Yeah.
And he's waiting for that. And that's a powerful point because he's not letting excitement cloud his judgment.
Yep.
He's waiting for that clear affirmation from God.
Yes.
And then overwhelmed with gratitude, he doesn't just mentally thank God.
Right.
He physically bows down and worships.
Yeah.
He gets on his face.
Yeah, it's a physical response
Yeah,
to what he's seeing.
absolutely.
And it really speaks volumes about his understanding of God's providence.
Yes.
He recognizes that this wasn't just a coincidence.
It was orchestrated.
This was divinely orchestrated. This encounter.
This was God's plan.
And it really makes you think, what about us?
Yes.
What about you listening right now?
What major decisions
What major decisions are you facing?
are you facing?
And are you seeking that same level of clarity and confirmation from God?
Yes.
Because it's easy to think finding a spouse was a huge deal back then.
Right.
But, my choices aren't that important.
Right.
But the truth is,
God cares.
God cares about every aspect
Every single
Yeah.
detail
of our lives.
of your life. He wants to guide you.
He wants to guide us no matter how big or small,
Absolutely.
the decision.
Every decision.
And kind of makes you wonder, how often do we miss those Rebecca moments
Right.
in our own lives?
Because we're not paying attention.
Because we're not paying attention.
Or we're not seeking God's guidance intentionally.
Yeah.
The way we should.
Yeah, and I think it's a challenge for all of us.
It is.
To really shift our mindset.
From my will be done.
Yeah, for my will be done to like,
To God, what is your best for my life?
yes, what is your best for my life, God?
What do you want?
For me. It's about surrendering control and trusting that God's plan, even if it looks different
Yes.
than what we envision,
Than what we had in mind.
is ultimately for our good.
It is.
But surrender doesn't mean passivity, right? We still have a role to play
Absolutely.
in the decision-making process.
We do.
And I think the servant story is such a great example of this.
He
prays, he waits for confirmation, and then he acts.
He acts decisively.
Decisively.
He doesn't hesitate.
Yeah, and he doesn't hesitate.
He doesn't sit around.
He steps forward with confidence, knowing God is leading the way.
Yes.
And I think it's a beautiful reminder that, like, faith and action
go hand in hand.
Go hand in hand.
They work together.
We seek God's guidance.
We listen for his voice.
We listen for his voice, and then we move forward with boldness.
Yes.
Trusting that he will work all things together for good. So far, we've seen the servant encounter Rebecca at the well.
Right.
He's received that confirmation from God.
Yes.
But the story doesn't end there.
The journey continues.
The journey continues.
Yeah.
What happens next in this, like, divine matchmaking journey?
I don't know. You'll have to wait for part 2.
Yeah, stay tuned for part 2, where we'll unpack the next stage of the story and uncover even more insights.
Even more.
On trusting God's lead.
That's right.
Welcome back. So last time we kind of left off with, like, the servant encountering Rebecca at the well and receiving that, like, undeniable confirmation from God.
Right, that sign.
Yeah. So what happens next? Does he, like, whisk her way back to Isaac?
Well, not exactly. It's, important to remember the cultural context here.
Right.
The servant knows he needs to approach Rebecca's family.
Right.
And seek their blessing.
Yeah.
Before anything else can proceed.
That's a good point. It shows respect for her and her family, even in this, like, divinely orchestrated situation.
Absolutely. The servant is operating with both faith and wisdom.
Right.
He understands God's leading, but he also, navigates the situation with sensitivity and cultural awareness.
So how does that play out? Like, how does he approach her family?
Well, he's very straightforward, actually.
Okay.
He tells them about Abraham, his wealth, the promise to Isaac, and his oath to find Isaac a wife from among their relatives.
He doesn't beat around the bush?
He doesn't beat around the bush. He lays it all out there.
Yeah.
The good and the potentially challenging.
It's interesting how he doesn't try to, like, sugarcoat anything.
Right, he's honest.
Yeah, he's just like, straight up, this is the situation.
This is what's happening. This is who we are. This is what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And he even mentions Abraham's foresight in anticipating potential resistance.
Oh, wow.
And releasing him from the oath if the family refused.
Okay.
So, like, he's already kind of, thought through.
Yeah, he's, like, prepared for the what-ifs.
He's prepared for the what-ifs, and it shows a very realistic understanding of human nature.
Yeah, because even with, like, God's clear guidance, there's still room for human choice and, the possibility of things not going as planned.
Exactly. It highlights this kind of delicate balance between trusting God's sovereignty.
Right.
And acknowledging human agency.
Yeah.
We have choices.
Right.
And it's a valuable lesson for us, too. We can seek God's will with all our hearts.
Right.
But we also need to be prepared for unexpected turns.
Yeah.
And, respect the choices of others.
Absolutely. So what's the family's reaction? Are they immediately on board with this whole, like, arranged marriage thing?
Well, they're certainly impressed with the servant's account of Abraham's prosperity and God's blessing upon him.
Right. He's like coming from this really blessed family.
Right, exactly. But ultimately, they wisely recognize that the decision rests with Rebecca.
Right.
And with God's will.
Yeah, they don't just, like, force her into it.
They don't force her into it.
They're like, okay, Rebecca, what do you think? And I love that they didn't just jump at the opportunity for, like, a potentially advantageous match.
Right. It wasn't just about the money or the status. It was about seeking God's will.
Yes.
And respecting Rebecca's voice in the matter.
And it's a beautiful example of how, like, families can navigate significant decisions together.
Yes.
Seeking God's wisdom and honoring, like, individual choices.
Absolutely.
Working together.
It makes me think, like, how often do we approach, like, big decisions with that same combination of, like, discernment and respect?
Right.
Really seeking God and also honoring the people involved.
It's a good question.
Yeah. So the family turns to Rebecca and they ask her directly, will you go with this man?
It's a big question.
It's a huge moment.
It is.
Her response will not just shape her own life, but potentially the course of history.
Right.
And her answer is so simple, but so profound.
It is.
I will go.
I will go.
Wow. No hesitation, no conditions.
The text doesn't delve into like her inner turmoil or doubts.
But I think we can glean a few things from her response.
Yeah.
It seems like she senses God's hand in all of this.
Yeah.
The servant's prayer, the perfectly timed encounter, her family's receptiveness, it all points to a divine orchestration.
Right.
Like, God is at work here.
Yeah. And her willingness to go, to leave her comfort zone
Yes.
and embrace the unknown speaks volumes about her faith.
It's not blind obedience.
It's not just like, okay, I'll do whatever you say.
It's a courageous step of trust.
It really is.
Yeah.
And her story reminds us that like sometimes following God's lead requires us to step out of our comfort zones and embrace the unknown.
To let go of what's familiar.
Yeah, it may involve leaving behind the familiar and venturing into like uncharted territory.
Uncharted territory. That can be scary.
It can be very scary.
But Rebecca's story shows us that when we align our will with God's will, even when it's challenging, we can experience incredible blessing
Right.
and be a part of something so much bigger than ourselves. Absolutely. It's about surrendering our own limited vision and trusting that God's plans are always for our good,
Right.
even when we can't fully grasp them in the moment.
Yeah, so she agrees to go, and there's this beautiful moment of farewell and blessing.
Yes. Her family sends her off with prayers.
Yeah.
Entrusting her to God's care.
And they also send her nurse and maidservants to accompany her.
Right. They're not sending her off alone.
It's a touching image of community support.
It is.
Even though they're letting her go, they're not sending her off alone.
Yeah, they're surrounding her with love and care.
Yeah, as she embarks on this new chapter.
A new adventure.
And it reminds us that, like, we're not meant to walk this journey of faith alone.
No, we need each other.
We need each other.
We need the support of our communities
Our families, our friends.
to encourage us, pray for us, walk alongside us.
Yeah, and I love how her story highlights this theme of, like, recognizing God's answers.
Yes.
Because sometimes we're so focused on how we think he should answer
Right.
that we miss the signs he's already giving us.
That's so true. We get caught up in our own timelines and expectations. But Rebecca's story reminds us to be attentive, to look for those unexpected confirmations, those moments of synchronicity that point to God's hand at work.
Those little winks from God.
Yes.
And once we recognize God's guidance, it's about responding with faith and obedience.
Right.
Like Rebecca, we may be called to step out of our comfort zones and embrace the unknown, trusting that he is leading us towards something far greater
Yeah.
than we could ever imagine.
Trusting in his plan.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Rebecca sets off on this incredible journey of faith, guided by God's hand, accompanied by the servant and her entourage.
Right.
But the story doesn't end there.
No, it doesn't.
The journey continues, and Rebecca is about to encounter Isaac for the very first time.
The moment we've all been waiting for.
Yeah. So join us for part 3 as we unpack the culmination of this divinely orchestrated meeting.
Right.
And uncover even more insights on what it truly means to trust and follow God's lead. All right, so we're back, and the anticipation is building. You know, Rebecca's journey has led her to the first encounter with Isaac.
Yeah, it's a huge moment.
It is. It's not just a meeting. It's like a pivotal moment that will shape the future of Abraham's lineage and ultimately impact the course of history.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful picture of God's providence at work.
Right.
You know, weaving together these individual lives
Yeah.
to fulfill his grand purposes.
And it reminds us that, like, our lives aren't just these isolated events.
Right.
They're part of, like, a larger tapestry
Yes.
woven by the hand of God.
A beautiful tapestry.
So set the scene for us. Like, where does this long-awaited meeting take place?
Okay, so as the sun begins to set, Isaac goes out to the field, you know, maybe to meditate or pray.
Okay.
He's probably carrying the weight of his father's legacy, you know, the promises passed down to him,
Yeah.
the responsibility of carrying that torch of faith. And then in the distance, he sees camels approaching.
Oh, I bet that sparked, like, a mix of curiosity and anticipation.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, like, who is this?
Yeah, and Rebecca, seeing Isaac for the first time, asks the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?"
Right.
And the servant replies simply, "He is my master."
Yeah.
And Rebecca's response, I think, is so telling. She takes her veil and covers herself.
It's a gesture of respect,
Yeah,
modesty,
yeah.
acknowledging Isaac's position and authority.
It's a beautiful detail. It speaks volumes about her character and her understanding of the significance of this encounter.
Right.
You know, she's not just meeting a potential husband,
Right.
she's meeting the heir to God's covenant promises.
Absolutely. And highlights the importance of approaching relationships, especially those with the potential from deep commitment, with that sense of reverence and respect.
So the stage is set, the introductions are made, what happens next?
Well, the servant recounts the entire journey to Isaac.
Detailing the prayer at the well, the encounter with Rebecca, her family's blessing and her willingness to come.
Yeah.
It's a moment of sharing testimony, acknowledging God's hand in bringing them together.
It makes me think about how we often rush through that, like, getting to know you phase in relationships today.
Right.
Like, there's something really profound about taking the time to share our stories.
Absolutely.
To acknowledge the journey that led us to this point.
I agree. It's about recognizing that relationships aren't just about like two individuals colliding.
Right.
They're about the convergence of two unique stories.
Yes.
Shaped by experiences, choices, and, in this case, divine providence.
Yeah. And so, Isaac, hearing all of this, what's his response?
Well, the text tells us Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent and took Rebekah as his wife, and he's left her.
It's so beautifully understated, but so powerful.
It is.
There's so much packed into those few words.
It speaks of acceptance commitment, a love that's not merely based on outward appearances,
Right.
but on a deeper recognition of shared purpose. Divine orchestration.
It highlights that, like, true love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice, a commitment.
A decision.
A decision to build a life together.
And in this case, it's a love that's rooted in faith.
Right.
In the understanding that God has brought them together for a greater purpose.
And their union, born out of obedience and trust in God's plan, becomes the foundation for the fulfillment of God's promises to Abraham.
Right. Through Isaac and Rebekah, the lineage continues,
Yeah.
ultimately leading to the birth of Jesus.
It's a stunning reminder that our seemingly personal choices can have ripple effects that extend far beyond our own lives.
We're all part of a larger story.
Yes.
And our decisions, especially those rooted in faith and obedience, can have an impact that we may never fully comprehend.
It's awe-inspiring. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the story of Abraham's servant Rebekah and Isaac, what are some key takeaways that we can carry with us into our own lives?
Well, first and foremost, it reminds us that God cares about every detail of our lives.
Yeah.
Even those that seem insignificant. He's interested in our relationships, our decisions, our hopes and dreams.
He's not a distant observer.
No, he's an active participant, orchestrating circumstances for our good and weaving together the tapestry of our lives to fulfill his purposes.
And it's comforting to know that we're not navigating this journey alone.
We're not.
He's with us every step of the way, guiding us, providing for us, and working all things together for good.
The story also underscores the importance of seeking God's guidance in every aspect of our lives.
Right.
Especially when it comes to those major decisions.
Yeah, just like the servant prayed for specific direction.
Yes.
We need to approach our choices with humility, asking for his wisdom, and trusting that his plan is ultimately better than our own.
And sometimes, like Rebekah, that means stepping out of our comfort zones and embracing the unknown.
It takes courage.
It does.
And faith to surrender our own plans and follow his lead, even when it feels uncertain or challenging.
But the story reminds us that obedience is not a burden.
Right.
It's a pathway to blessing.
When we align our will with God's will, we open ourselves up to experiencing his faithfulness in incredible ways and becoming part of something much bigger than ourselves. So as we conclude, I want to leave you with this thought. What areas of your life might require greater surrender to God's guidance?
What steps of faith might he be calling you to take?
Remember, he cares about every detail, every decision, every relationship.
He's waiting to guide you, to provide for you, and to weave your story into his grand tapestry of redemption.
It's an adventure worth embracing. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.